All right, welcome everyone. We have another very special podcast. Friend of mine, Shane Neiman. This is number 124. Shane, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Jeff. How you doing?
Hanging in, man. You know, same old, same crazy time, different times in the world, and a lot going on. So we'll
Yeah, well,
dive
we're
in and
lucky that we're both in Miami for sure.
yes, it is nice. Miami's kind of one of those spots that's less, I guess, affected or just open and moving. So it's nice. I got back here recently and am enjoying it. But why don't we first, again, my podcast more poker dominant, but we've just started embarking on a bit of a poker journey for you and learning a bit. But why
Yes.
don't introduce yourself for those that maybe not know who you are, since you're not a professional poker player, maybe one day. But for now, tell us who you are, what's going on.
My name is Shane Neiman, as you said, and the name of my company is called Neiman Ventures. I am a three-time tech founder. I've done, and the last tech company that I did is a company called Easy Texting, which is a software as a service communications platform using SMS.
Okay.
So if you're familiar with MailChimp or Constant Contact for email. We do the same thing, but for texting and SMS. I started that company in 2005. I built it for 10 years. And then I'm the founder, but I'm no longer running that company. I'm still, kind of slightly involved, but I exited, and for the last 7 years, I've been doing venture investing, crypto. I've been doing real estate investing, and all different kinds of private equity investments, and kind of just being opportunistic, and also kind of trying not to put all my eggs in one basket and trying out different kind of and now I'm learning from you about NFTs. So we were texting about that, right? So uh,
Yeah, NFT, crypto, this blockchain, all this space is interesting. Obviously, sports cards, that's kind of more what I'm into. The NFT is interesting with this NBA Top Shot. I think, it's funny because I've been hearing a lot about it. I just dove in very recently, and then you kind of messaged me asking about it, and it's it's an interesting time. There's a lot of that going on. So I think this is like one of those periods of time in the world that there's a lot of opportunity. Sort of a new age, new generation, new era of investing and alternative assets. So it's kind of fun if you're taking a dive, you can really hit some big returns and get into the right place with the appropriate bet sizing, which, again, one of the principles we want to kind of talk about and how it
yeah.
correlates in poker and business. So I think there is a lot of crossover, and that's sort of what we want to focus on. And just tell me a bit more, because this is actually, I know you mentioned this before, and I was just looking at the website and I'm not familiar with it, but is this something like for business or like someone
So
for
yeah,
influencers?
so
Like, how do you use it?
businesses,
Yeah.
yeah, so businesses kind of use it. Well, they use it to build their text messaging lists, and get people to subscribe to their text messaging list. So if you've ever seen an ad where it says, I don't know, text coupon to 313131, right? Those special 5 or 6 digit short codes.
Yeah.
And then you text in and you get a coupon, or you subscribe to a service like that. We enabled that. We were actually the first ones and the only ones in 2005 to bring that to small to medium sized businesses and have a platform. Everybody's kind of familiar with Twilio, but Twilio is a API provider where we're more like a platform provider that allows you to do great things like manage your text list, send out text blasts, schedule texts, receive texts, and do one-on-one texting with your customers. All that kind of great stuff that you can do with email, essentially.
Interesting.
Um,
I'm actually not as familiar with that stuff, but I do know Gary Vaynerchuk. Who are you familiar with him? Gary V.
I don't know him, no.
Okay, so he's pretty big into social media, and he's actually, well, really big into cards. He just sold his wine company. He's a serial entrepreneur. You probably seen him around. He's just kind of everywhere. But anyway,
Right.
I notice is one of the people I've seen like with the text thing, where he's like text this number, so it's kind of looks like this is what
Yeah.
this is. And I was wondering, how small or big would it make sense for someone, someone myself, like I have some Discord groups, I have an email newsletter. Like, at what point would it make sense for someone to create a texting thing? 'Cause this is new to me. I've never
Let me tell you
done something.
something. What was really awesome about the service, especially in the beginning, when we first started, even texting from your phone wasn't that. ubiquitous. BlackBerry started coming out, then, and came out a little bit before then, but
Right.
texting was a little bit of a pain. But when we were educating businesses and people about how to build their text lists, and it was more of like an educational ramp up. But when people and businesses saw the power that text messages have, what's so amazing about it is that everybody has text messages on their phone, right? They have a text, it's a built-in app. Right. You don't need to download it. You don't need to create an account for it. You can't turn it off, right? It's got 95+% read rates, which are insane for communication. Not even calling has that kind of pickup rate, right? So even if you call someone, which is the most direct form of marketing or advertising. So I think, if you want your message read and Twitter started through text messages. That's why it has a 160 character limit. I don't know if you
I didn't
know that, because SMS is 100, old SMS, not the new one. It had 160 character limit. So, it just has, it's the most superior form of communication in terms of read rates, in terms of ubiquity. And I think everybody should have it, and platforms like Easy Texting make it really cheap and simple to start building one and, managing one. Right.
But so is that something that, so would an influencer, like, at what point do you think it would make sense for someone to have a text business? At what size and what scale, and like where does it
make sense? The best thing, it's just like saying, I think it's for businesses, it's like, when you start your business, no matter how big or small you are, you need to have a website, you need to have an email address, you need to have a Facebook account, a Twitter account, you need to have business cards, right? Well, maybe not now during COVID, because you're not going to see anyone, but you need all of that. And I think that's just another tool in your toolbox is, when you get a MailChimp account to build your email list, you're going to need it to build your SMS list too. And you'll see that might be one of the most effective tools for you to communicate with your customers, your fans, whoever it may be. You should start right away, I think.
And because, I mean, I'm guessing, so what, it's similar to a newsletter. It's just people opt in or out, because I'm trying to understand it. Like for me, yeah, like you're right. Text, you're going to see it either, whatever. It basically goes there and it's very rare you're going to ignore it. I know there's some like DoorDash scams or some other stuff. Like there's been some like messaging.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. There's like a lot of spam text, right? Yeah. But our system actually helps with that. The Easy Texting system and one similar to it helps with that, because it keeps you compliant. It makes sure that people can opt out. It makes sure, it cleans your list, if the text message bounces and that kind of thing. So it has all those tools that you would need. You can't really run that off your phone. It's just a much more professional. It's almost like, it would almost be like trying to create your email newsletter by sending out a BCC email from your Gmail, right? You can't really, it's not a professional way of doing it. Right?
Very interesting. How did you decide to go and dive into this particularly? Like, what made you think this was a good idea?
So I actually have a degree in computer science from NYU, and I went to med school, dropped out of med school, went to work for a startup. That was my first job. I got recruited out of med school for that. And we built the first blogging system. So I had a lot of development experience. And I started another startup, which was an application service provider after that. And that failed. We'll talk about that later, about going all in and why you shouldn't. And I have a really good story about that, to tell you the truth.
I like it.
Anyway, so and then I built another company called Junebug, which is it was like an online events company, pre-MySpace, pre-Facebook, pre-even camera phone. And we kind of went around all the events in New York and Miami and LA and took pictures and put all the events on the website. And we did our own events, and we helped brands like Johnny Walker and Mercedes kind of reach that target demographic. And one of the things that we did was we sent an email newsletter out to everyone, and we were really the first people to do that. To adopt sending out big email campaigns. When I did that, there wasn't even like a service like MailChimp or something like that to do it. We had to build our own program to send out these massive amounts of emails and get our own servers in a rack to do it.
Right.
And so anyway, as time went on with that company, the efficacy of email started to drop because everyone and their mother had an email list now, right? So like the nightclub had the email, the promoter had the email, their own email list, the theater had their own email list,
Right.
the brand had their own email list. So, we're like one of 2,580 emails in your inbox when
Right.
we used to be the only game in town. And in 2005, I kind of sat down and I thought, well, how do I cut through the clutter? How do I get through to people without going into their inbox? And the idea came to me, and I said, oh, let's do it through text. And I started Googling it, right? And software for sending text messages, and that didn't work. And then, I tried every kind of variation you can imagine, and I'm like, holy shit, there's really nothing that does this.
Right.
And I was pretty amazed about it. And given my background, I said, all right, I'm going to figure this out. And I built the first system really for us to use internally for my other company. And it was a really expensive endeavor to do that. It was costly, time consuming, and that kind of stuff. And I said, you know what? I'm going to kind of offer this to our current clients, who were the nightclubs, the promoters, the concert promoters, a lot of different customers that we had built over the years. And I started giving them access to it. And within a month or two, it wasn't just subsidizing itself. It was like making us like, I don't know, like 10 grand a month in profit. And we're like, this might be a business in itself, right?
Yeah,
and
cool.
So we separated it out, and I started to really just focus on building a platform for any type of business to run their own text messaging campaign, because I saw that there was a huge demand for it. I mean, I needed it myself, essentially, for our own company.
It's interesting. It sort of reminds me, and I think you could almost, a lot of businesses that are successful or tech stuff right now, like kind of like Uber too. It's like something that it's something that everyone does, everyone has, everyone uses, and you're kind of making something out of nothing, right? Like something that exists. Like there's taxi cabs, and now, but it's so annoying, right? Like how to organize it. How do you you have to call. You're in a place like. It's just crazy to think that wasn't but a decade ago or less, right? I don't know, 6, 7 years ago.
Jeff, when I started my company and I told people what I was going to do, and I bootstrapped it because everyone I would tell, first of all, I needed it for my own business, and it wasn't its own standalone business in the beginning. So I kind of did that. But when I really wanted to focus on it, I wanted to pile a lot of money and time and effort into it and just focus on that. But when I was telling everybody, I mean, everybody was like telling me my idea was like crap. They're like, text messages, those are old. Like you need to be like making, a texting, like like a WhatsApp, or you should be like focusing on in-app messaging, and that's the future. But again, like I told you, they were all wrong. I mean, if you look, Easy Texting's, doing like crazy, has 150,000 customers on it, right? Generating tens of millions of dollars in revenue. And Twilio is known for its text messaging API. It's like a $10 billion. I don't even know what.
I haven't heard of Twilio. I have not heard of that company. So
it's a big public company, and all they do is kind of provide programmatic communication services like we do, right? And so. And texting actually is growing at 20% a year. Wow. And everybody was wrong, right? Like everybody still uses text messages, right? That's like
I mean, there's a lot of Telegram, WhatsApp. WhatsApp's gotten some security. Look, people are a little less high on that, and there's Signal and all these other kind of variations, Discord. But what's your thought on those?
Listen, I think those are all great, right? Bless you.
Thank you.
I think those are all great, and they all have their own feature set that kind of caters to a large portion of people. But you know, SMS actually doesn't even, you know, you got to think about the rest of the world, right? There's like this whole part of the rest of the world that doesn't even have internet access. SMS works on a cell signal. You don't even need internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all you need is a signal for your cell phone, and you can even have, you know, like a non-featured handset that's like one of those old Nokias, and you can still get a text.
Right.
It is like the fundamental like app on all phones, right?
Yeah.
So you know that's the thing, is that
it's interesting you say that as well, because like in 2000, I remember in 2012, I went down for a charity event. Like my friend Antonio Sfandiari, I think we talked, you know, of him. He won the One Drop, this big poker tournament. It was like 18 million first. Went down. Part of it was to go down to El Salvador, Honduras for, you know, to like see how the money in the charity they raised, like 5 million for charity, and how it was being used, and that like people didn't have running water. Like it's crazy how much people there were 7-8 people in a hammock, you know, sleeping in a house, but they all had cell phones. Every single person had a cell phone, and that was like mind blowing to me, you know. And like that's like, and like your point, like everyone, you know, you might not have internet, and I know Zuckerberg was trying to do this thing worldwide with Facebook, or get everyone internet, everyone so they have Facebook, these type of things. But really, like text, fundamentally, that's the way to communicate. Where you know, at that level, you can get.
It works with everyone. It's simple. Yeah. It's 160. You know, like it's not too long. Just like Twitter is, you can get your point across. People can reply to it. Your phone number follows you everywhere. So if you switch your phone, you can still get the text messages. No one like kind of gets, you know, no one kind of gets rid of their phone numbers anymore because of number portability.
Yeah.
But in any case, it became a, you know, thing, you know, it was a lot of hard work, right? It was a lot of being at the right place at the right time. So a lot of luck, which we'll talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a really big success. And so, you know, now in Neiman Ventures, what I'm doing is just like, you know, many people in your audience, you know, I'm exploring new investment types, you know, like crypto and NFTs, and, you know, even kind of private equity kind of stuff. And so one of the reasons why you and I actually even hooked up is because I want to really hone my skills of understanding odds,
right,
and figuring out whether or not I'm making a smart move, right? And you know, I've read a lot about this, and you know, poker seems to be the best analog to real life, more than chess, because apparently chess, you know, there's only a finite amount of, you know, moves that you can make, and you can see all the chess pieces, right? In poker, just like real life, you know, you can't read someone's mind, and there's a shit ton of things that you have no idea what you don't know about, right?
Exactly.
So there's all this like blind spots that, you know, you have to kind of make decisions through. And you know, I see that a lot because and you know, what I was thinking is, and I kind of have been recommending, I do a lot of venture capital, seed stage, early stage venture capital investing. And I talk to a lot of founders that are hustling, you know, maybe it's their first time, maybe it's their second time around. And, you know, some of them are young, some of them are old, doesn't really matter. But the thing that, you know, I always recommend to them is kind of reading 2 books. One is The 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz, which will, you know, is just kind of sets you in the mental state of being a good person and being happy. Fundamentally,
there's always one of the 4 agreements that's hard for me to remember. But I know it's be impeccable with your word, always do your best.
Don't take anything personally.
Yeah, don't take personally. Very, very powerful.
Yes. Always do your best. Don't take anything personally. Be impeccable with your word, and don't make assumptions.
That's big. Yeah.
Don't make assumptions. That was pretty good. I remembered it, right? I reread it every year, just so you know. So I just read it in January. So that's why I can remember it.
I love it.
And then I always tell them to go and learn poker, right? And I'm going down that same path of, and I'm learning the basics, and you and I have had like a session or two where you're kind of giving me some advice about how to think and understand odds and that kind of thing, or maybe even take a probability course. There's these free probability courses on MIT or Harvard right now that you can take. But for startup founders, they're dealing with uncertainty all the time, right? They're like the most uncertain people ever. They could go broke and their company could go out of business anytime, right? And they're also dealing with venture capitalists. A lot of them are raising money, and there's this chicken game going on between venture capitalists and founders, right? The venture capitalist wants to invest in your company if they like it, at the best terms possible.
Yeah.
And you want the opposite, right? And so you have to convince the venture capitalist that your company's worth investing in, and that you're a responsible person that can be successful, and your product is the next best thing, and all these things.
This falls into the category of bluffing in some degree, but it's like, actually there's a term in poker called semi-bluffing. So this is so there's bluffing, which is like, you're just not telling the truth and it's whatever. So I know that we were kind of going over some bullet points, and sort of this falls into the bluffing, but I would say more semi-bluffing. Like, so a semi-bluff would be where you have the potential, like if you have ace high, like ace 5 of hearts, and the board is jack 9-4 with 2 hearts, like you have a possibility of a very good hand because you could make the nuts, right? You could hit the heart and make the actual best hand, or you could hit an ace and probably have the best hand because you'd make top pair. So if you're bluffing, like the hand's over, it's like you're almost like being disingenuine, right? It's like, oh my, you're trying to sell your company, but it's not good. You're trying to whatever. So I would say semi-bluffing, which is sort of really what it is. It's always, you're betting on the come, and what is it, and is it this percent, is it that percent? But that would be a good way to look at it. And actually, it's a fascinating question because valuation seems so high always. Like that people, you hear these numbers and they're ambiguous, and there's a lot of what ifs and a lot of uncertainty. So how do you, coming from the business world, how do you deal with this actual principle? Because it seems a bit complex, and there's a lot, it's a big numbers a lot of the time too, which is even, there's a lot at stake.
Yes. It's very hard, right? It's like an art more than a science, right? And a lot of it is now dictated by kind of like the public markets are, right? Because there's so many venture capitalists now. And now in the game, back in the day, the only game was like the VCs. But now you have these like, Kickstarter, which is like a platform, or Kickstarter-like platforms where people can start their businesses and get people to buy their product before they have it. Or there's companies like Fundrise that do this for real estate, but I'm sure there's going to be companies that do, that raise money for seed round companies. There's this guy, Packy McDermott, who's kind of doing this right now. He has an AngelList syndicate, and he writes this like this awesome newsletter. He creates a syndicate, and he writes all about the company and why he thinks it's a good investment. And then he emails it out to his list, and he allows people who are accredited investors to go on AngelList and invest in that particular company, right? And how are the valuations coming through? It's a little bit of basically who's willing to pay the most. It's almost like an auction process, right? Like, so now there's even family offices that do venture capital, right? There's I don't know, hedge funds that do venture capital now, right? Like Dan Loeb, who has Third Point, which is arguably like one of the best, hedge funds out there, just started his first VC fund, right? So there, it's a supply and demand thing, right? Which is kind of scary because that shouldn't be dictating what your company's worth. Right. It's a lot of who are the founders. That's really, like, for me, it's 90% of it, right? Because, I'm not sure. I can have a predilection to a particular product because I think it's cool or awesome. But just like people told me that SMS was shit, like, I could be wrong about a company, right? Like, I thought Snap was like the worst company in the world. and like look at it, it's hitting all-time highs today, right? uh, you know, I thought it was the worst company in the world because I thought the product was really bad. But you could be completely wrong in that. But you know, the founders are good, they're resilient, they're smart, they can figure it out. That's what you're really betting on. And also, you know, VC is like kind of like, I guess like playing a game. I guess it's not like poker. It's like a little bit more like roulette, where you're putting your chips like all over the table, and if one of them hits, it can make up for all the bad bets you made previous to that.
Right. That's also, I think, one of the more interesting principles, and I think we're very similar in this. And you probably, you know, you have more experience. You've been doing this for a bit longer. I'm 34 years old. How old are you? 40.
I'm actually 44, so 44. I'll be 44 next month.
So you got a decade on me, and you know you know what you've seen my mind kind of. I'm all over the place. I got a lot of different little sprinkles of bets, but it's interesting because I
like that.
Roulette was like my one bad habit. You know, I don't really sports bet. That was the game of choice. I know the odds. It's negative 2.7% on a zero wheel, negative 5.4% on a double zero. So if you bet $100 on a double zero roulette wheel, you're losing every single bet. You're losing $5.40. I mean, that's a lot. That's a pretty big markup. But you know, with that being said, you have some 35 to ones. You put on numbers, and I always used to call a thing called smash and cover. So with my friends, we would bet like, you know, let's say we're betting $500 on a spin. We would put like 3 chips on, you know, three $5 chips on. We'd have like a system where we had a lot of numbers. We have a few big hits, then we have a few kind of covers where it would like basically cover our bet size. And obviously, listen, I'm not trying to act like I'm solving roulette. It's a negative game no matter how you do it, but there are some strategies in terms of like, because if you always bet the same amount or whatever, you just go broke, right? Like you have to have some chances at a success. But the point being, it's kind of funny how, you know, you get business ideas and then or business opportunities and you sort of invest accordingly. Like I have some, you know, let's call it in units, I'll bet 1 unit, and some I bet 10 or 15 or 20 units. So it's like, you know, it's kind of weird too. Like a poker tournament, I might play the World Series of Poker main event, 10K buy-in, and win it. Or I might min cash or not cash, and then I might win like $100 buy-in tournament. So like, even though it's the same game, they're you know, the same principle. Sure, there's different skill levels of people playing, and it's so similar. But like, it's just funny, right? You don't know which one you're gonna win. So like, your bet that you put a little bet on might win, and the one you put your biggest bet might fail.
One, right?
Yeah. So you got.
It's kind of arbitrary. So one of the things you have to do is come up with a system. You know, if you're gonna really do this as a like a real business, and you know, and investing. You know, you have to come up with a system and be very disciplined about it because, look, you know, you can get really kind of excited about one thing, and like you're saying, the Kelly criteria, you could put all your eggs in one basket and get wiped out, right? And that's actually happened to me before. Well, actually in investing too, but. You know, my first kind of attempt at doing a startup back in, let's say, 1999, 2000, I went all in, right? I sold my car. I had saved up all this money from working before that. I put all my money in. So did my partners, just so you know. We raised, actually, at that time, it was like the .com bubble, right? So it was, if you can imagine how insane it is right now, it was like 100 times more insane than what it is right now.
People are going nuts. Money's flying around. You just like, you just don't want to miss out.
Yeah, I was like 22 years old, right? And I never done anything like this before, other than work for another startup and be their senior, you know, their lead developer. And you know, we started this company, and you know, bam, someone throws us $1 million. You know, to invest in us. And we never seen that kind of money in our lives, right? And we started, we built the product. We actually even get some customers. The product was essentially what you can imagine as, it was Microsoft 365. That's how early we were about it. You know, you as a business can come in, get all your Outlook, your Word, your, you know, QuickBooks or whatever else you use in what, we didn't call it an app store. We didn't even have the name for app store then, right? We called it in like a marketplace, and you would pay a monthly fee for it. And we called that utilitizing computing, kind of like your utility bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of calling it software as a service, which is what you call now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all these terms like blog, none of that existed, right? And anyway, we built it, and we got customers, but we again, the black swan came, right? 9/11 happened, the dot-com bubble burst, and everybody kind of fled, and all the liquidity went away, and VCs wouldn't give us the money that they told us that they would give us, right? They
Right.
stopped giving it to us. And you know I I had taken some of the money also during that time and opened like an E-Trade account, because E-Trade was the newest thing. I put my money in all these like high flying stocks, and that went to zero. I mean, like I was like at $50,000, and I thought I was completely rich, and I left with like $2,000 at the end of it. And I left something that I worked on for 2 years completely broke, because I had put every single everything of mine in there, to the point where I was like kind of like ashamed about it. I didn't tell like my family. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't, like I had to like move in with my girlfriend because I couldn't pay my rent,
Right.
that kind of thing, right?
And looking back on that, was that like hedging or differently, or you just, because there's something to be said about believing in what you're doing, right? But it's also, you gotta, like this is something that happens commonly in poker, where people, especially early on, obviously as you get
Yeah,
older, you have responsibilities, you have a significant other, you have a child. It's like we say in poker, if you come in right now, like if you were to start poker right now, it's a lot
yeah,
different than if you start when you're 18, because like
yeah,
you're risking not
yeah,
that
for
much. You
sure.
start with
I'm
very
not
little.
gonna. I'm
Yeah.
gonna keep something on the pot on the side so I live
Right.
if Armageddon happens,
Right.
right?
But so this was a valuable
Yes, I
lesson.
mean,
I mean, it sounds like it was something that was maybe even it could actually work out for the future, as you've obviously had a lot of success, which you learned some lessons, you took some shots, learned what worked, what didn't, and also maybe to not have that feeling again, and I had to remember like what that felt like to kind of go back to
listen,
nothing.
time heals and time makes you forget.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of dumb shit since then. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And and then I get punched in the stomach, and it reminds me every so often to kind of get my head on straight, and think about it. But this is what I also like about poker, and what you've been actually teaching me is that it's like this fine line of being resilient enough that the blows that you take don't knock you down forever, right? But you also don't become so scared that you don't take a risk when you see the odds are in your favor,
Right.
right? And that's a really hard thing. It's like this emotional agility, right? Or emotional intelligence that's even more important than being smart or working hard or any of those things that they say founders should do, right?
Yes.
It's like 95% of it is not just going batshit crazy because you go through this emotional roller coaster. I mean, like, just think about when you're playing a poker tournament. When you lose, right? How are you keeping yourself even keel and not letting that fuck with your head, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think that's one of the best things is, to be able to keep your, you got to stay even keeled. Like, you hit a lottery, you hit a big score, you get like a ridiculous return or whatever, and it's like easy to get excited, spend a lot, do stuff, and be kind of be
Yeah, on the other
cocky.
side of it, right? On
Yeah,
the
and
other
it's
side of it,
also, when
you
it goes
become
really,
overconfident, right?
yes, and when it
You're
goes
like the
really,
best poker player in the world.
yeah, and when it goes really wrong, it's also important not to get too down or negative and depressed or whatever. So like this is a very, I think this is a great thing to be able to have, not be results oriented, and also, some people really respond differently. Some people have they have a difficult result or event, and they're able to bounce back and come back stronger, harder, and motivated. And some, take a hit and they get shy and embarrassed and upset, and it can really go the other way. So those are some things that I think kind of intangibles attributes you have as a person that are not, not always. It's just kind of what it is, right? You either you have it or you don't.
What do you do? What do you do? Like, what are some of the techniques that you use to kind of not let yourself go either way? Like,
Well,
do you have any tricks or tips or something that you do?
I mean, the biggest thing I would say is that I bankroll management. Like this is kind of something I've just done from day one. And maybe I could be a
Mhm.
lot further along, or I could have been further along earlier, but I just never was
Mhm.
really willing to go broke. So like, I came in, started at the smallest stakes, The games were very soft, did well, but I didn't rush up. Like even when I gathered some money, I didn't just like take my whole roll and go sit at the biggest game, even if I thought I had an edge, because I didn't want to like go all the way to zero. So I never really did that. Almost, I was pretty risk averse. Don't get me wrong, I did take some chances, but some of those chances were in tournaments where I still was only risking a certain amount. And then if I lost, it would be that. But the upside was big, and I hit a couple tournament scores and got a bankroll going. But like I've all I would sell action if I thought a game was really good and it was a higher stakes. I would sell action. There was times where I was staked, right? Like for a big game, like let's say it was a massive game that I wasn't ready to play on my own. I was fortunate in that way too, that I had friends or people that would buy a piece of me or even give me really good deals where like I would have no risk and get 50%, right? Which is pretty sweet. Like to risk 100 grand.
Those are great bets.
Like
you make more bets where the odds are in your favor and the downside is lower than the upside.
Right.
The upside's lower, much higher than the downside.
And I mean, I think that's again that's partly, I guess, the biggest thing I would say is bankroll management. However, that means for you is to not put something that's gonna affect you, impact your life in a really negative way if it doesn't go well, and have kind of a hedge or backup or
but Jeff, just to be kind of like practical about things, right? Like even though you might lose to the extent where you're still going to be fine, it still feels pretty crappy to lose, right? And it shifts your mindset. Like you're going to have a really bad day that day. Like for me, I have a few techniques that whenever I kind of see myself going into crazy land, right? And, having, incessant thoughts and, reiterating what I did wrong over and over again in my mind and not sleeping and that kind of stuff, even if it's not like a catastrophic loss, right? I feel like, what is it like? Do you have like some sort of mental trick that you do where when you're in the tournament and you're like, let's say you have a losing streak, right? That, kind of keeps you even keel and not kind of go spiral out of control in your mind?
I mean, I do work with mental coach, a couple guys, Coach Bauman and Elliot Rowe in particular, like which helps me, but obviously they're not always, available. I'm not like talking to them during a tournament all the time. Sometimes I'll try to have a call with them before it starts, or just being a good routine. But I think, really it's just being focused, being present. I try to take deep breaths and just sort of realize, I always like to think worst case. It's like start thinking about like what's the worst that could happen, or and so in the tournament I've already sort of visualized, busting or not getting knocked out. And honestly, it's more so too that I have a wife who's very results oriented, which rightfully so. Like that, like I come home and I bust a tournament. She doesn't care that I had kings and the guy had ace 3 off and I'm 70% and the guy hit a lucky card. Like I'm out of the tournament. Like it's like, why are you here? Why are you? I thought you weren't free tonight and now I'm free. Like which she's happy about, but then not. So it's like you have to already like have it predetermined and understand that what's realistic, what's going to happen, and things don't always work out. And I think that makes things a lot easier than if you have false hopes and stuff. So I think it's just a lot about mental preparation.
I agree with that. Two of the things that you said, I kind of do too, right? Like one is there's this exercise that I learned from, I know this is like kind of cliche because like everybody listens to Tim Ferriss, but Tim Ferriss, like when in his early, podcasts, he did this whole thing, and I think he did a TEDx about it, is this fear setting exercise that he does, where he kind of lays out all his fears and then, kind of goes through the worst case scenario and like the likelihood that would ever happen and, what he could do to mitigate the worst case scenario. And then, you kind of almost live the worst case scenario in your mind.
Right.
And it's not that bad anymore. It's like, it's something that comes from stoicism, right? It's a stoic philosophy kind of situation.
Yeah.
I found that it's been super helpful. Yeah. Right. And it seems like you kind of do that automatically a little bit when you're doing it.
Yeah. And I just think you want to be prepared. You want to understand what, the highs and the lows are, and what, again, not get too caught up in the result and that results oriented. I think that's a huge thing and something that I think that that's a lot of people are.
You got to be in it for the long haul, right? The long haul is the odds game is a long haul. At any given time, you could get unlucky, and even if you do everything right, just get unlucky, right? And a lot of founders need to understand that, because a lot of them give up, right? But they might have an awesome idea, be an awesome founder, do everything correctly and just have bad luck,
Right.
and bad luck happens to a lot of people. And they have to be able to get up and pivot or start again from scratch. It's very hard to do, but if you're good at that, that makes you a good startup founder, I
I mean,
think.
it's honestly, it's fascinating too, because this is such a common principle in poker too, and it's actually in tournament play. After a sample size, like it's variance, right? Like variance is a real thing.
Mhm.
It's variance in life, variance in poker. But you could play a year of poker every day, let's say, or 5 days a week of online tournaments. Play 10 tournaments a week, and it's all about volume. But at the end of the year, you could be losing money as a winning poker player, and that's tricky because then you want to look at it and you say, wow, like, am I playing bad? Am I running bad? And it's a bit tricky to know. And that's the same thing in business as well. Like, it's not, you could have the greatest idea. Maybe you had a bad CTO. Maybe you had a bad marketing department. Like, there's so many what
Or
ifs.
maybe COVID hits and it ruins your
Yes,
business.
exactly. So then, like, that's actually an interesting thing as well right now with COVID. Is like I feel like it's almost a cop out in some ways because you could say, oh, like it didn't work because of COVID, and that may be true. Maybe you have no chance of succeeding, but also maybe you could have got a government grant. Maybe you could have done something differently.
Sure.
Maybe you could have pivoted to online or delivery, or maybe you could have found, whatever. There's like a lot of ways and a lot of. It's easy to just kind of cop out and say, oh, like this happened, and I'm like this thing got
I
buried,
totally
and
agree. I have, I come from, I was born in Brooklyn. I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Long Island and then moved to the city when I was 18. And, I, I have a lot, New York City got really crushed in this
hmm
thing. I have a lot of friends in the events business because of my previous business. And I saw those guys hustle. They
right,
switched to selling masks, to selling gloves, to, you
yep,
know, I don't really even know. Like they were like, I was part of this crazy WhatsApp group. Everybody was hustling and finding new things. They became real estate agents. They did whatever they needed to do to pivot and kind of ride out the bad time.
right. And I think
Until well,
Jason
it's still there.
Strauss, we both, you were talking about this, right, Jason? Tao,
Yeah, I
these,
know him from a long time ago. I
yeah,
know him from high school a long
high
time
school.
ago.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, good friend of mine, and unbelievable what they've done. I know they sold a decent chunk to MSG, but Tao, Lavo, Marquee, these type of places, and really industry hit hard. But you're staying on top of it, really being alert, knowing how to
Yeah, they
exactly
did this
pivot.
meal delivery kit.
Yeah,
They did New Year's Eve at home with a
right.
comic, virtual. They're really smart. They figured it out. Who knows whether that's actually working or not? But at least they're
Right.
trying.
Yeah, they're aware of conditions and
Yeah,
circumstances, and
so
they're and they're
that's one thing. And then the breathing, it's crazy because when March rolled around and COVID hit, I just like everyone else, I was freaking out, right? Like
right.
I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
A lot of the things in my businesses went down. I own a lot of real estate, so my tenants stopped paying me. Um, stocks went down. Like everything was like kind of falling apart at one time, right?
Right.
Not just for me, but for everyone, right? And so, I kind of took a little bit of a breather, and I wanted to get my mind off things, and I started watching Netflix, and I saw this episode of Goop about this guy Wim Hof. Have you heard of
Of
him
course.
before?
Yeah. The breathing. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I watched this thing, and just to kind of preface this, before this I had like years of debilitating back pain, like crazy back pain that I tried like everything and spent tons of money trying to fix my back. Just couldn't do it. Like every step I would take would hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I watched this, and he's like, "Oh, if you do this breathing, it can fix your whatever." So long story short, I do it. It works. I do it every day now because like my back is completely like perfect. But what this has to do with everything is that the secondary benefit that I saw by doing this breathing is I'm like a lot more calmer and even keeled. I'm nicer. Maybe because my back doesn't hurt. Maybe I don't know, but it's like totally. And every time I see myself going into that spiral, you're right. Like the breath is what. If you can control your breath,
Right.
you can control your mind. You can control your business. You can control
Yes.
your life. that kind of thing.
I agree. The
You
other
have
thing,
the mental fortitude to do it,
that's a
right?
good. That's a really. My wife had told me about this. I've seen him. I haven't. I can't say I actively do that, but I do think that like that's something. Breathing in general, it's just kind of good for overall and helps you sleep too at night. I think if you're like taking deep breaths and do the
Yeah.
counting stuff, it
I
can.
started this new one that I don't know if you know this guy Ben Greenfield, Ben Greenfield
No.
Fitness. He's kind of really famous. He's this biohacker, age
Right.
hacker. He made this book which is like an encyclopedia of anti-aging.
Okay.
He's like he's like one of these kind of social media stars that does a
What's
lot
his
of
name? I'm gonna
different.
make a note of it.
Yeah, he's so he I listened to one of his podcasts and he talked about this thing box breathing, and I've been trying that and it's crazy. You just basically breathe out slowly 4 times, hold your breath for 4 seconds, and then you hold your breath for 4 seconds. You breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, and then repeat.
What's his name?
Ben Greenfield. His thing is Ben Greenfield Fitness. And I just ordered his book, so I'm reading it. He's famous. A lot of people know him. He's a very famous podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna check him off and make a note about check him out and look at note Wilm Hof
Yeah.
as well to check that out. But I want to say one of the other things just to kind of answer your question as well about what helps me in poker is when I do look at because one thing in poker is common is bad beats, right? People take bad beats. You lose ace king to ace queen, which feels like, oh, how could it happen? But really, it's like 75-25 or whatever, right? So you're gonna lose one out of 4 times, but it feels like it's personal. Like, how could that happen? It's like I have the best hand and I'm supposed to win this, and this is a common hand in tournaments that just happens. Where like ace queen is a pretty good hand, ace king's a very good hand. You get it, the money goes in when the stacks get short, right? We talk about big blinds. You start a tournament, you're deep. It's not just going to be all in, but when you get down to 20, 30 blinds, ace queen, you're happy to get your money all in because you're shortish and like so whatever. So like this is a hand you may lose, and then it's easy to say like, oh, why me, or I'm so unlucky. But then I think one of the things that helps the most is you start looking at other areas of your life, whatever that might be. You're married, or you have a kid, or your family, or you have your health, you have your house, you have an apartment, you have a car, you have a dog, you have things that friends
Gratitude.
like gratitude. Great, what are you grateful for? And this is like this to me ultimately is like in the moment when you talk about poker or you talk about business or something, when you have something that doesn't appear to go right, you got to think like, all right, there's a lot of things that are like this is just a small blip, and it's just very easy to be jaded and to be not
It's
aware. This is like something I think it instantly brings me back to reality when I then think of other things in my life that are positive. That I think is a nice kind of hack on terms of feeling unlucky or whatever, and that's something that's
For
I
sure.
think
And
most
it
people
kind of
are
brings
not
you,
good
it
at that.
shifts your perspective. It
Yes.
shifts your perspective back to and that's actually happened to me. It's funny that you say, you play this amazing hand where you think it's like a sure shot, right? And I do, like I said, I do real estate investing. I did some investments in New York a few years back that were multi-year projects, like one in Dumbo where I did the Watchtower, which was arguably like the most coveted section of New York City. It was a home run. If you told anyone it was a home run, this is the best real estate. It was commensurate to gold. Could you imagine that, right? And so, WeWork was going to master lease it. And, 1 month before that, WeWork blows up. And then someone else is going to lease it. And then COVID hits. And now no one's going to the offices anymore.
Right.
Something that was
did WeWork go under or like out of business, or what happened with that, or just
no, they're not out of business, but they definitely didn't go into new leases. They got like an internal blow up.
Right.
So they've actually been cutting back. And COVID really killed them too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it was like, I don't know. If someone told me that to gauge what the odds of success of this was, it was virtually 100%.
Right.
And prime New York City real estate. And now everyone's flocking from New York City to Miami, right? Yeah. And no one wants to be in New York City, which is crazy.
Right. And these are things that you can't just like, it happens. And if you're positioned, things don't happen overnight. You can't just like click a button, get out, move to another. It's like, there's a lot of luck in that. I mean, again, variance, let's talk about odds, like a 2-outer with 1 to come. If you have aces, I have kings, pre-flop, That's it's a
Yes.
cooler. That's like a super sick cooler. Like, can't blame you for going on. Can't blame me. I'm 80% favorite with aces. We go to the river. If the board is clean, right? Let's say it's deuce deuce, 7 9. Go one more card to come. The river card. Do you know what 2 outs with one card to come is? What the percent chances?
No, but I hope you teach me
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
it's 4.5%, 2 outs. Let's say even you have 1 out. Let's say someone else burned a king, it would be 2.2%. So like that seems impossible. Let's say this other guy folded king five, right? A random folded
Yes.
king. There's one king left in the deck. Boom, the river hits a king. 2.2%. It feels like it's rigged. It's impossible, but that's gonna happen 2 out of 100 times. It's not impossible. Stuff does happen. Let's take
Yeah.
Tom Brady. You remember the New York Giants Super Bowl where like the Patriots were undefeated going into the Super Bowl. They had won every game in the regular season. They were in the Super Bowl winning at the end. Eli Manning, the Giants, he throws that pass. He scrambles. He should have been sacked 4 times. The guy catches on his helmet by an inch. They go on and win the game. Okay? It's like, this is an impossible loss. Like, it's impossible. And
Yeah.
it happens. Look at Brady then. Look at Brady in Texas. I was at the game. It was 28-3 going at like halftime. ESPN.com, 99.7%. 99, not 97, 99.7 out of 1,000 times they're going to win 3. I think that's what the math is, right? 99.7.
Yeah.
He did it. They won. If it can happen, it will happen. And you have to be prepared and understand that. And look at the variance. Brady should have won that other game, and he got another chance in the same Super Bowl as a huge underdog and got lucky there. Variance. Be there, show up, put yourself in position to
Yes.
win, and good things will happen. I mean, that's really what it's about.
It's it's
You know?
really funny because just like again, that's like a really good example. I mean, look at the lotto. If you look at the back of your lotto ticket, it's like one in a billion chance that you'll win the lotto, right? But
Yeah.
people win the lotto all the time,
Yeah.
right? It's like the odds of you winning lotto is less than being hit by lightning, right? And yet people win the lotto.
Yes.
They win the Powerball, right? Someone won the Powerball and won like $1 billion recently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the odds of that is crazy.
I
And
it's funny. Last week, I hit a daily fantasy score. So like DraftKings for golf.
yes,
So my
yeah,
buddy Mike and I were splitting some action, and we put in $3,000 worth of action, and we won 88 grand or whatever, 83 grand.
wow,
And we actually were winning more. We had the number one and number two golfer in the final. They went to
the
playoff,
odds
but we
would
had
have been
both.
against
We
you in
well,
that.
yeah. I mean, that's like there was a 1,300 person field that we took second in, and we actually lost on the last thing based on how they finished, and we won a tournament. Like, but this is luck, right? Like, I don't,
Yeah,
there's some skill with picking some players and some stuff you can do, but ultimately you're betting on like whatever, and that's just pure luck, right? Like, it's just kind of crazy, and you can't control, and the guy misses a birdie or he gets sick or this and that, and it's just kind of
that's why you got to stay even keel. You
yes,
can't let one thing make you overconfident or go into complete despair. Um,
yes.
but like Jeff, what is like the one rule or kind of motto or something you live, work, and kind of live your whole life by?
I mean, one thing my dad taught me, which I'm very lucky. My parents are very supportive about like poker and kind of how I went, where I just sort of transitioned from college into still playing some poker and had a score
That's
and just
really
sort of
nice.
went. So, which is great. But my dad, something that he taught me, and just something he didn't make this saying up, but basically it's not about it's not about what happens, it's how you react to what happens. I think that has like really stuck with me because like so many times like I can just look at like situations that whether Black Friday for poker happened, they closed gaming, like they all of a sudden woke up, DOJ shut down the poker sites, you went to it, your money was frozen like for a bit, and now I was playing online poker, living with my friend, I could be anywhere in the country and go play, and now I couldn't. So it's like, all right, what do I move to Canada or Mexico, or what happens? It seemed like the worst thing ever, but it turned out to be the
Mhm.
biggest blessing. I started getting back in shape. I started traveling more, playing live games, and ultimately changed my life. Where if it hadn't gone that way, the path I was on would be all different. So like stuff like that, or getting broken up with, or a bad luck in a tournament or a business idea that I was going to invest in that would have hit like 100x or 200x. Like I could have had a 1% of DraftKings. I think I told you this with Jason Robbins. I was investing with my buddy Bill Perkins and Dave Silverman. Didn't end up getting it. Would have been like a infinite X, but maybe I wasn't ready. 2013. Maybe I wasn't ready to have all this money or whatever. Like you just don't know. So it's like it's not about what happens. It's how you react. And that to me is like, so it's cliche. It sort of like makes sense, but it's just like I use that all the time. And when bad things happen, I kind of dig in deep. I sit down, I process it, and I think, okay, how am I going to be better? How am I going to move through this? And how am I going to, snap out of this and do my best? That's my biggest thing.
So. I love that. Like that we were just talking about COVID. It's the same thing, right? There are people who, use it as an excuse to give up. And there are people who, made the best of the situation, just like you were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have a very kind of similar motto too, and mine is basically like always be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like constantly keep yourself uncomfortable because it's too easy to become complacent and not make the best of the situation and not try new things because you're comfortable in what you're doing right now. Whether it's in your personal life, with your, just like you said, you got yourself in shape, that's getting uncomfortable. It sucks. You get sore and you gotta, you sweat and, you gotta change your stuff. Right. And you gotta be like constantly doing that kind of stuff. Like even for me, doing podcasts, the first podcast I did was sucky, I'm sure the same was for you, right?
Yes.
But you did it and you got yourself uncomfortable and now you're comfortable doing it, right?
Yeah, it's also just taking that first step. It's so easy to say, oh, the month is, I'm going to start March 1st. Oh, I'm going to start New Year's resolutions. Oh, I'm going to like do this after I get my camera, the better camera to start. Like, no, if you want to start a podcast, if you want to start a Twitch, if you want to start YouTube, just do it. Throw it up. I mean, I look at my first YouTube video and it was just trash. Like I was experimenting. And the same thing with Twitch. Look at my first podcast. Now I have a better background. I got a case made. I got a better camera. I got a better microphone. But when I started doing it, I just did it. I go look at my first thing, the green screen, the how it looks. It's like, it doesn't look right. It probably sounded funny. Talk way too much, which I still do as a podcast host, but it's the Twitch streamer in me. But it's always improving, like that's what it's about. I just do it and then it goes. Don't worry about, oh, am I going to get a sponsorship deal? Oh, Joe Rogan did make out $100 million deal. Who cares? I don't know. I like doing podcasts. It's fun. It's good. And like, if I end up getting picked up or getting some ad revenue and stuff, like cool, like that would be great. But that's not my goal. Like I just want to do it because I love it. I enjoy it and I enjoy the process. And that, take that first step. I think that's, again, easier. That's one of those cliche things, but it's just so many people are unwilling to do it.
It's one of the fundamental rules for founders of companies too, like that's the thing, these sometimes founders, they get so caught up in the things that are unimportant or the details that don't make sense. Like, oh, what color is my logo? Or what's the domain name that I'm going to use? Or, what's the website colors going to be? Like all these like things that, just get the damn website up and put it on some domain and, like just pick a logo and move on, right? Like don't harp on it. And those things aren't going to, those things you can change, you can develop, you can, you can get better at over time. But the important thing is to do it and to constantly do more and build on top of what you've been doing.
I got to flash over this real quick. So last week I told you in Daily Fantasy, my buddy and I, we hit a lineup. This week, if it ended right now, we'd win 151 grand. But we're in first place in this $3,000 buy-in tournament, 100 grand to first. But it's super, super early. But we have got a lead in the field, which is pretty exciting. It's early. This is like, this is like in a tournament on day one. And the first couple out, like 4 hours, but still, it's nice.
All this can change in 1 second, right?
Of course. I mean, last week, I don't know how I can see. Oh, history, yeah. So I can see last 7 days. So like last week, we ended up, like I said, we ended up winning. We took second out of 1,300 in this tournament. Then we took first out of 555. Pretty sick. We lost on the last play. of this tournament. I think there was 1,300 entries, and we got second place in this out of whatever. But anyway, yeah, 1,266 entries. We took second, and then we won another one. But this is like they actually. The funny part is Daily Fantasy copied. They copied poker. They use multi-table tournaments. Same thing, a buy-in, set amount thing. They do single table. You can do heads up. You can do double ups. You can do 9-person, 18, 27. So they actually copied the model, and it's genius how they did it. But again, this is like
that's why you're so good at it. That's why you're so good at it.
I'm honestly, this is like my buddy. My friend is the one. My friend is the one who's he's like makes most of the picks and stuff, and he's into golf. But I mean, whatever. It's fun. It's fun. And there are sites and analytics, and there is a lot of work with it as well. Like just like anything you can do. You can do some stuff. But anyway, yeah. So like, I think I really like this about covering kind of how it applies in business, and I think we really hit some interesting points in talking, but understanding the odds and also we're talking like Kelly Criterion, that kind of bet sizing and outcomes. What would you say? I just want to touch about your company when you sold it. How were you able to kind of leverage the sale? Like, how did you for what was it? Easy Texting. How did you say, okay, we have this many users. This is what we're doing. This is monetizing. Were you able to get the valuation you thought when you sold your piece?
Everything in retrospect, changes, right? I think I did as well as I possibly could have at that time. But, if I were to do it over again and knowing what I know now, could I have possibly gotten more? Maybe, but that, they could have walked away too, just like you said, the other unknown factor of not knowing what your opponent is thinking, right? So it's a very intricate song and dance that you have to play. Ultimately it has to come down to what you think is reasonable and what you can kind of live with, and it's somewhere in the middle, kind of like, I guess, litigation. If you think about it, right? Like, everybody kind of leaves a little bit disappointed, but they're happy it's done, right? So SaaS companies, obviously, I sold my company in 2013, are valued very differently now than they were 7 or 8 years ago. They're worth a lot more. So in retrospect, had I held, would I be in a different place? Maybe, but I would have lived a totally different life in the last 8 years. Right. I have 2 kids. I have a wife. I moved to Miami. Maybe a lot of those things would have never happened to me had I stayed. Who knows?
I gotta ask you this too about taking off the table hedging, right? What is like Bitcoin, crypto? Let's say you get in an early time, or NFT, Top Shot, you hit some returns. Let's look at sports cards. I've gotten into sports cards. Take that example. I told you I'm excited about it. The market's hot. It's pumping, and there's been some similar to Bitcoin. There's corrections. Like, it was up. Bitcoin's 58. It was down to 48. It's back 50. It's probably like, it seems to follow a pattern.
It's so funny. My friend asks me this a lot. Okay,
yeah.
Go ahead.
So how do you decide? Like, all right, I got a 20, 30, 50x return. Should I cash out? Because you've got to be, in my opinion, it's like you need to be realistic. All right, you bought a $300 card. It's 22 grand. Like, it's probably a good time. You might want to sell it or take some off the table, because at some point, it could correct. Other things happen, new things change, and you can't, as long as you can say, okay, if I sell it now and it goes to 50, it doubles from here.
Yes.
I'm not going to be upset or cry, or you take a fraction of it or something, because like you got to take some gains at certain points. It's tricky.
I got an answer for you, okay? And it's not a great answer, but it's my answer and it's what I do. It's the thing is that you just never know. And for me, and each situation is different. Everybody's situation is different. So I bought Bitcoin in 2012, actually. I had a team of developers. We had a big team in Ukraine for Easy Texting. I went to Ukraine, and one of my developers was like, look at this. This is Bitcoin. And he's like, you need to buy this. And I'm like, all right, put $1,000 into it or something like that.
Right.
And, like I bought it at some crazy low price of, I don't even remember what it was. It was like 10 or $20 at that time. I
Yeah,
really don't remember.
disgustingly low for sure. That was like the
Yeah,
early,
it
early.
was crazy. And then like it hit like $1,000 and I sold half of it like a schmuck, right? Like 4 years later or something like that. And I was like, whoa, this is never gonna go higher than this, right? And I never bought it back, right? But thankfully, I kept the other half, and I am not complaining in the least bit. I am very thankful, and I'm very fortunate that happened to me. But you know, as it continues to go up, and I'm friends. My friends and I are in a WhatsApp group for crypto, right?
Right.
And they're like, okay, hit 50,000. Should I get out? Right. And my answer is that, okay, you're going to get out. You're going to have to pay tax on that, right? Whether it's long or short-term gains, right?
Yeah.
If it's short-term, it's like 40%, which is a shit ton of money, right?
Right.
And so, you're really making 60% of whatever it is that you think you're making, because at the end of the year, you're going to have to pay 40% to the government, right?
Mhm.
And then what are you going to buy? And how are you going to know when's the time to go back in, right? So if you're in a situation where you don't need that money to live off of, or you don't have another really good alternative to put it in, and you still believe in that asset, right? Like you still believe Bitcoin is going to be around in 10 years from now, then you need to be like Warren Buffett. Somewhat. Warren Buffett will never buy Bitcoin, right? But his whole idea of compounding, right, is still applicable, right?
Yes.
In 10 years from now, is it going to be 50,000 or is it going to be 1,000,000, right? And what else can you put in your money in that will give you that kind of return? Not too many things that I know. And is it worth the risk? And how much of your money is allocated to this, right?
Yes.
It's a bunch of different things,
Well,
right?
this is again the point too with that is if you put in Bitcoin in 2016, let's even say it's 50x. Like December 16, I remember was 900 a coin. Let's just call it 50, 60x. Like your net worth likely is different, right? Like if you had 100 grand,
your mindset's different.
And now it's like this. Your net worth was this, and now it's like your net BTC is this allocation, and you're over here. So like that would be a good time, like Kelly Criterion. That'd be a good time to like shift it. All right, I'm gonna put some in the stock market. I'm gonna put some in cash. I'm gonna put some in this. I'm gonna buy a house and like move that. So you gotta kind of, it's like, so Bill Perkins, who's a very good friend of mine, he's been on the podcast twice. Trades natural gas. I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Shane or not, or heard the name. Just
I've heard his name, but
yes.
I'm not familiar.
He wrote this book, Die with Zero. It's really fascinating, actually.
Yes. I know who he is. Okay.
So he would say he trades like, he's $20 million swing some days, like in his fund. He was training John Arnold, the golden boy from Centaurus. I'm sorry, from what's that big company, that Enron. He left Enron before it hit fan. He's a genius guy, right? Started a fund, but they would always make them take out. So when they would hit a big score, they would make them cash it all out. And then say, all right, you want to put more back in? Because similar to poker accounts, similar to whatever, until you cash out or take it, it doesn't even seem real sometimes. Like, all right, you got this Bitcoin money that like went up a lot. But you just think like a thing. But go ahead, put that Bitcoin into your, transfer it into like cash, and then go ahead and tell me how much you're going to put back into Bitcoin, because it doesn't feel real and it's deal. And that was a huge lesson. When he told me, I was like, wow, that's right. Like same thing with poker. If you hit a score, you want to pull it down and then reevaluate, because like you can't just go on autopilot and like, oh, like whatever. It's like, here's this and that. You really need to make constant adjustments and improvements, especially when your net worth substantially shifts. I think that's really important to not be.
You can't have all your eggs in one basket, like we did.
And it can change, and you can hit a lucky thing, but if you don't capitalize on it, you can be in the same spot you were. It doesn't happen all the time. You're gonna get 20, 50x returns, like. You
want to talk about emotional agility, that's the thing, like this guy who has his fund and, watches his fund go 20, 40, $50 million this way or that way. Like it's hard to become desensitized to that.
Exactly.
Right?
That's a great word. Desensitized.
That's the hardest part, Jeff. Again, like I said, it's not about being smart. It's not about even particularly being lucky. It's not about working hard. It's about having the emotional fortitude to follow the rules,
Yes.
right?
It's all, it's
When you want to do something else that you're not, like your emotions are telling you to do, right?
It's also it's also about not chasing and being mentally tough. Like I can say from experience, like I did very well with Bitcoin because I won a tournament in 2016, got paid in Bitcoin. It was
Yeah,
900 a coin. Got out kind
yeah,
of like randomly because of tax reasons. I wanted to get out in 20 that 1 year, right? That was, I mean, this is, can't
yeah,
make it up. This was like when 2017 was at the peak, right? 19,000.
yeah,
Got a chunk
yeah.
out, left some, and then rode around with it. But like the point being, you know, on the rise up, like I bought a house, I put some money in sports cards, I did other stuff. Like I don't have as much BTC as like I would have liked. And then all of a sudden it was like it was between 8 and 12K for like months, like 5 months, 7 months, 6 months. All of a sudden it just went nuts. And like it's so easy to say, oh, like I wish I had more, or I could have done this differently. You can't think like that. You can't chase. You have to be
It
realistic
could have
and
went the other
understand.
way.
Yeah, you
It
can't
could,
predict stuff like
the
this
government could have
exactly.
said Bitcoin's illegal, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
It would have been over,
Right.
right?
Or some, computer supercomputing gets expedited, or someone cracks it. Like you're still, there is risks. There is like
Yeah.
percentage chances that stuff could happen, and you want to just be able to pivot and be alert. So I
You
think
want
that's
to be able
important too.
to
It's so
survive.
easy to
You want
get frustrated or look at other people too. Oh, this guy, this wow, his friend I know did this, or they made all this money, or you got to be happy for people. You want to wish the best for people, and you just got to kind of do your best and not get too caught up on being results oriented or timing stuff, and just try to make educated good bets, make good decisions, and kind of go. So I think we covered a lot of the topics: resilience, understanding odds, outcomes, being not results oriented, emotional agility. I think that is something, again, we sort of been covering and talking about, being able to come through and find ways to get out of a funk. If something's not working, it's important to stop, take a pause, get back to neutral, and then reshift. It's like in poker when you're losing, or if you're playing a lot and things aren't going well, it's not generally a good idea to bet more and chase and try to get there and force it. You want to like get back to neutral, reset, decide what's going,
Sure.
review, study, take some time, maybe play less tables. If it's in business, maybe focus on one or two things instead of you're trying to do everything. So,
Yes.
I think that's important to be
Yeah.
like the emotional agility and have that wherewithal. And I think being
Absolutely.
aware is the biggest thing. You got to be aware because it's so easy to just like go through the motions and just kind of be on autopilot. Like it's important to be aware of what's happening, and that's easier said than done as well. And it's good to have a good partner, whether it's your wife, someone to kind of keep you in check in reality, and or a business partner or a
You need a
friend.
support system.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
really, even if it's just your friends or if it's someone online or something like that. And a lot of times, in the VC world, if you're a good VC, you can be that for a founder, and that might make the difference between a winning investment or a losing investment in many cases.
Yes.
To kind
I
of be there for them.
I completely agree. Well, and I guess, is there any other? We covered this pretty.
No, I think we got a lot of stuff covered.
Yes. We
Anyone who wants to start a business has got a long trek and journey in front of them, aside from learning how to play poker and all the stuff that we talked about. Hopefully, maybe there's a few people out there that this talk really helped, and really kind of put things in perspective. You never know how you affect people.
Yes,
So
and would you, I guess, in closing, if you were to say someone who is looking to dive into business in general, or to take like a serious approach or start their own business, so would be there any advice you would give, just as an overview? And again, it's so wide on what you could be doing, whether it's
I
investing
mean,
or business.
listen, obviously everything is being geared through tech. But maybe it might be the right time to be contrarian. All these hospitality businesses have gone out of business, or really, except for maybe Florida, maybe Miami, right? Like where all the restaurants are open. But everybody's moving to Florida. Maybe the right move now is to move to like the big city where you can be, like where all the big fish left, right? And you have a better chance of making it.
Right.
Maybe you can open a restaurant in New York City because a lot of them have shuttered. Maybe you can open a retail store or a bookstore, something that really no one would think of doing because it's just the worst time to possibly think of doing it right now. That's when you really see some really great results is when people do things that are counterintuitive, and they get really successful that way.
I agree completely. Well, listen, Shane, it's a pleasure, and I hope that we get to do this again, and people can check out your website. They can check out the Easy Tech thing. It's just kind of cool. I'm actually going to look into that. It's something I do not do, and I think maybe with my content business would be something very beneficial
Well,
to.
you have my number. I'll hook you up. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
let me know, and give him a follow, guys, on Instagram, and of course he is on his website if you want to know more about Shane, what he has going. And in terms of podcast stuff, you do what is the you do a regular podcast? I know you appear in a lot of podcasts.
No, I don't have my own podcast. It's something I've been thinking about, and a lot of people have asked me about, but I got a million other things, and I have Instagram and a lot of other social media stuff going on. I write a lot, and I write about business and some personal stuff that I go through, that people have told me is pretty good. So I
Awesome.
write a blog, and that's mostly what I do right now.
Very cool. All right, well, Shane, that's going to be a wrap on number 124 of the podcast here on the Flow Show. I appreciate it very much and look forward to catching
Thank
up soon. And
you. This was awesome and super fun.
yeah,
Thanks so much.
it's really, really good, man. Thanks for the time, and then I'll see you soon for some poker lessons and other
Yes,
some fun. So,
let's do it.
all right, thanks
Thanks
a
a
lot.
lot.
All right, guys, that
Bye.
was Shane Neiman, number 124. Please check out his website. Does a lot of content, a lot of info, and I think has a newsletter and some other information you guys can get and be a part of, and obviously a lot of interesting insights and business experience. So this was a lot of fun, and we'll have some other big podcasts soon. So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave comments below on what you thought, and of course we'll have a Twitter giveaway for some cash and prizes as always. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.